from the 2020 election, we need to trust God's sovereignty. Can I get an amen? Psalms 103:19, the Lord establishes his throne in the heavens, and his sovereignty rules over all. What does God's sovereignty mean? What am I talking about? God's sovereignty is when God divinely chooses to do something. Often it's what he chose before the foundations of the world. And God's providence is God's sovereignty being carried out, being worked out. And we could say everything that happens is within the scope of God's providence. I don't know about you, but I'm happy about that. I'm sure glad somebody is on the throne and that everything is within the scope of his providence. The election was God's sovereignty. The pandemic was God's sovereignty. Otherwise, theologically, you're stuck with a world that's chaotic with no purpose and no meaning and nobody charting the course. Now, providence are those things that happen in our life God does beyond our control. I love that. How many of you like the idea that God can do things in your life beyond your control? Providence is a bigger miracle than a miracle. Let me explain that. A miracle suspends natural law one time to get something done. God can stop the sun. God can part the sea. God can raise from the dead. But providence is where God takes all the contingencies in the natural world and orchestrates them all for a supernatural effect to meet his purposes. That's far more complicated than a miracle. And God's sovereignty, which is why I believe Joe Biden is the 46th president of the United States, and he didn't slip past God and pull a fast one. It's incredible how many people, when you're left with discussing the subject with them, you're left with the idea those Democrats outwitted God again. Those deadly Democrats. Now, God's sovereignty plays a role in our life, so lean into this, folks. When God says all things work together for good to them who love God, who are called according to the purpose, that's God taking all the contingencies of your life, pointing them to help you become more Christ-like. When God says thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, God is taking all the contingencies of your life and enabling you to have peace.